In the dark eerie night, a woman stands atop a tower, balancing elegantly. Back on the ground, a rogue highwayman pursues a woman clad in a white cloak, striking her down with his sword. As he looks at her still form, a swarm of peacekeepers approach him, confronting him for his crimes. A scuffle breaks out and the highwayman single-handedly tackles the multiple peacekeepers with his seasoned swordsmanship. His attention is diverted from the woman who is suddenly engulfed in purple flames, whimpering and gasping. A dark-winged spirit rises from the ground and breathes life back into her body, causing her to transform into a beast. It roars at the peacekeepers who scurry away in fear. The highwayman is vigilant, eyeing the peculiar turn of events carefully. He catches sight of an airborne figure in the moonlit sky, approaching them with his unsheathed sword. He lands in front of the highwayman and faces the beast. A voice emits from the ring on his finger informing him of the nature of the beast. The creature is known as Hitobu and would call further horrors if not dealt with. The man acknowledges the message and draws a circle above him with his sword. A golden light emits from it and he is engulfed in an armor, immediately identifying himself to the highwayman as a Makai Knight. The viewers are given a brief background of the Makai Knights and the origin of the horrors. The beasts originated from the Makai Knights and soon enough a protector emerged to vanquish them. This knight is clad in golden armor and is known as Garo, the Golden Knight. He engages in deadly combat with the Hitobu, who calls on more horrors to emerge from the ground. The highwayman watches on as the horrors rise all around him. One emerges behind him which is tackled by a new character, not yet introduced to the audience. He tells the highwayman to flee as he spurs out instructions to his teammates on their battle strategy. A bored woman walks into the scene, introduced as Saimai. She pulls out her magic staff with a brush at the end and showers bullets of electricity on the Hitobu. The beast roars, inviting more demonized bat-like horrors to rise from the ground, and Saimai proceeds to obliterate one with a touch of her staff. Reiko Garo and his teammates continue to battle the horrors while the highwayman flees away. He stops in front of an ancient tree, slamming his hand on the trunk in frustration. He cries through clenched teeth, wondering out loud how much more karma he must collect. Suddenly several vines emerge from the willow in the tree, wrapping around his torso and forcing it into his mouth. They continue to tighten around him, strangling and choking him until they pull him into the tree. Suddenly, the dull buds all over the branches of the tree start to bloom, revealing beautiful white-petaled flowers. Cut to the next scene, Reiko Garo and his team fight the Hitobu. Saimai resurrects a barrier wall around them, trapping the beast, and Reiko Garo successfully drives a sword through its body, splitting the beast in half. The horrors, no longer fueled by the Hitobu, fade away into thin air. Saimai inspects the bodies of the slain peacekeepers. They are the Kabishi, a law enforcement body of the Heian era. Kintoki informs the two about the bandit who ran off before the horrors attacked. Saimai debates that she should have ended his life before she had started on the horrors and receives a gruff reply from Reiko Garo. Apparently, the two have a complicated relationship which usually ends in arguments, with Kintoki playing the role of the mediator most of the time. As the three walk away, Reiko Garo pauses and turns around to see the tower hovering over them in the night. Upon Kintoki's query, he shrugs and continues walking, giving a curious response that it must be his imagination. Meanwhile, the same woman from the first scene is seen walking away from the tower when a petal from the blooming flowers floats past her. She catches it in her hand with her eyes closed, calling it a grudge. A growling sound emits from the tree that engulfed the bandit, which is now in full bloom, sparkling in the dead of the night. The next morning, Reiko Garo and Kintoki are crafting a number of hand fans. Kintoki yawns loud and wide, still fatigued from their excursion the previous night. They are interrupted by a member of the Kabishi, who inquires whether they were at Abura Kuji last night. It's the same place where they encountered the horror. The Kabishi shows the two a wooden fan, exactly like the one they are crafting, and tells them it was found next to his slain comrade. Kintoki panics, recalling that one of the horrors had torn his backpack, which must have caused a fan to drop out of his bag. Reiko remains calm, however, claiming that a great many people buy their fans and they cannot keep track of who the fan belongs to. The Kabishi accepts his explanation, sharing that there is a bandit on the loose by the name of Tokumaru. Perhaps he is the one responsible for his comrade's passing. Kintoki agrees enthusiastically, sweating with anxiety that their secret may be revealed. He inquires whether the pair crossed paths with him. Reiko denies it and the Kabishi takes his leave. Kintoki profusely apologizes to Reiko for his carelessness, who is quick to dismiss it. Saimai isn't as kind. She continues to reflect on her missed chance to end the bandit's life, and Reiko scoffs at her words. On the upside, at least the Kabishi are doing their job. Reiko explains how one wing of the peace force has been tasked to take down criminals regardless of their social stature, which is why one member of their team, Yorinobu, hasn't been around much. He is a member of that wing and is occupied with his job to maintain law and order. Saimai doesn't care about any of that. As long as the kabishi do not interfere in their business, she has no problem. The following scene involves a magnificent feast with court attendants enjoying their meals and praising the court official Michinaga for arranging the splendid gathering. He is interrupted suddenly by the chief counselor of state storming into court in fury. He angrily calls out to Michinaga, walking gruffly toward him with clenched fists. Michinaga inquires politely about his reason to visit. The Dianagon pulls out a vial and brandishes it in front of Michinaga. He then slams it on the ground, shattering the article to reveal grubs inside. He claims that it was placed in his residence to curse the emperor. Michinaga animatedly acts appalled. He whips around to stare at his guests who are equally flabbergasted. A group of kabishi march in and take the Dianagon into custody. He resists, demanding to be released, and is informed that he is under arrest for attempting to curse the emperor. The Dianagon immediately denies the charges against him and blames Michinaga for setting him up. Michinaga walks up to the restrained Dianagon, telling him to confess his crimes and that his wife and children will not be harmed. The Dianagon glares angrily at Michinaga and is escorted out of court, yelling out insults at Michinaga. The members of the court are astonished, having always witnessed the Dianagon on good terms with the emperor. Another disturbance calls the attention of Michinaga, who turns around to find the same silver-haired beautiful woman holding a sword against one of the lords of the court. He introduces her as the Onmyouji he has hired recently. Her name is Akira. He witnessed her tackling a hindrance caused by horror and was impressed by her powers. Hence she is now a valued member of his court. Reiko, Kintoki, and Saimai head out to deliver their crafted wooden fans. Saimai grumbles and complains along the way and Reiko rolls his eyes at her impatience. Kintoki, being the clumsy one he is, drops the bag carrying the precious merchandise. He apologizes for his error and proceeds to pick up the fans. Reiko bends down to help him when he is interrupted by a fair hand reaching out for one of his fans. He looks up to find Akira in front of him. She picks a fan and whips it open, revealing a beautiful pattern of flowers printed on it. She asks if she can purchase it from Reiko, who is clearly smitten by her beauty. Kintoki interrupts, agreeing to her purchase. Same steps in, trying to stop Akira from buying it, and claims she can purchase it from the shop they are delivering to. Kintoki dismisses her quickly, plucking the fan out of her hand and handing it to Akira with a price. Amidst all this, Reiko can't help but think how familiar Akira looks. He inquires whether they have met before and she denies it, claiming she would not have been able to forget having met someone like him. She pays them and walks away gracefully, with Reiko being confronted by Saimai for his obvious attempt to woo her just then. He suddenly remembers how he sensed a presence the previous night after their encounter with the horrors. It was Akira. As the day proceeds, Michinaga along with his court officials travel across the river in their royal boat. Amidst the conversation, the courtiers bring up rumors of a recent blooming of a sakura tree which is related to an ancient vengeful deity known as Duke Kansas. Based on charges of treason, he was exiled and left the sakura tree in the care of a loyal servant. The servant looked after the sakura tree well, when one year it suddenly withered. Assuming something had happened to Kan, the servant headed to Dazaifu, the place where he had been exiled, and found his master safe and well. Kan was so pleased with him that he gave his servant a clay statue of himself. The servant brought the statue back with him and enshrined it in a hollow in the sakura tree, which caused it to bloom again. However, when Kan passed away, a lightning strike set the tree ablaze along with the rest of the city and the palace. Many court officials passed away, including the man responsible for Kan's demotion. Michinaga continues to narrate, ending the story with a conclusion that all signs point to the phenomenon being a curse. The officials fret about the possibility of more harm befalling the state now that the tree has bloomed again. Michinaga dismisses them, darkness taking over his eyes as he claims that the only fool to make an enemy of him would be a vengeful deity. As he says this, the boat is engulfed in strong winds while he sips on his tea calmly. Meanwhile, Reiko and Kintoki meet with the watchdogs who assign them the task to assess the broken seal of the sakura tree which has kept horrors at bay for centuries. They must replace the seal to avoid the gateway to more horrors being reopened as it had years ago. The two debate their capacities to fulfill this task on their way home. Reiko decides to ask for Same's help, who nonchalantly agrees, asking the two to wake her up when it's night. Akira, on the other hand, visits Michinaga's palace and informs him about her interaction with Reiko. As night falls, Reiko, Saimai, and Kintoki head to the sakura tree to assess the weakening seal. The tree is almost in full bloom. To their horror, they witness the tree branches pulsating like arteries from a beating heart. They follow the source of this phenomenon and locate a human body powering the tree's pulse. It is the same highwayman they saw the night before. The tree is drawing life from him, causing him to transform into a horror. Suddenly it starts to move, shooting out vines to capture the three. Reiko springs to action, slicing the vines with his sword. Same disintegrates the approaching vines with her electric powers while Kintoki beats away the tree's limbs with his club. It quickly becomes a challenge, however, with the three struggling to counter the strength of the horror that seems to want to pull them into its abyss like it did with the highwaymen. At that very moment, Akira appears, providing assistance to the three. Reiko thanks Akira for her help and inquires how she's here. He is interrupted by an eruption of the rock on which he stands, with the tree vines once again attempting to strangle his torso. Akira slices the vines with ease, and Same realizes she's a Makai priest. Reiko armors himself and charges at the tree to end the horror when Akira swings down, blocking his path. Makai knights must not harm humans, and the man entrapped in the tree is still human. Kintoki confirms her claim, and Reiko and Same are rendered speechless. The highwayman is drained of his blood and darkness by the tree while he is still alive. The tree continues to surround them with its deadly vines, and Reiko is forced to order them to retreat. Back at the headquarters, the three discuss the turn of events with Akira. She explains that the Sakura tree itself is the horror's real body. The bandit is nothing but nourishment for it so it may fully awaken. They cannot pull out the bandit as that may eliminate him, and it would paint a bad image of the Makai knights and priests. Akira walks over to Reiko, kneeling her head against his shoulder while explaining all this when Same springs between them, demanding an introduction from Akira. She introduces herself to them. She reveals that she works for Michinaga, causing outrage among the three. At the same time, swarms of the Kabishi raid their quarters. Their head asks Akira whether the three are the perpetrators of violence, and she agrees. Apparently, Reiko, Same, and Kintoki have been accused of holding a ceremony to unleash a vengeful deity upon the royal court. The head of the Kabishi holds up a fan crafted by Kintoki and Reiko as proof of their association with the crime. Reiko and Kintoki are captured by the Kabishi while Same manages to escape and pursues Akira on Reiko's orders. Back at court, the Dainagon is escorted for his execution. He watches in horror as the Kabishi fire blazing arrows on his estate, instantly ending the lives of his family members and burning his home to the ground. His screams of despair and fury can be heard in the dead of the night. As the day approaches, Reiko and Kintoki are dragged to court, tied up, and injured. Michinaga rejoices, finally having a Makai knight in his grasp. He compliments Akira's talents in the intimacy of his bedroom, and she embraces him, secretly planting a seal on his back while humbly denying to accept his kind words. In the next scene, we are finally introduced to Yorinobu, Reiko's brother, who rushes to their headquarters after hearing of his capture. Same catches him up on the developments of the Sakura tree and entrusts Reiko and Kintoki with his responsibility. On the other hand, Reiko and Kintoki remain entrapped in wooden restraints, fatigued and bruised. Reiko falls in and out of consciousness while Kintoki regrets his actions which may have contributed to their situation. The watchdogs continue to monitor the development of the Sakura tree. They sense that something is not right. At the same time, Same encounters Akira at the tree. She demands to know Akira's plans, which leads to Akira revealing her true identity. She belongs to the Haji clan, one that endured inhumane suffering at the hands of Michinaga. She plans to take his head for what he did to her family and her clan, and whatever she has done till now has been part of her elaborate revenge. As she narrates, Same hears the entrapped bandit call out to Akira, calling her sister dearest. She is alarmed to realize that Akira fed her own brother to the horror in order to bring it back to life. She is in complete shock. It is clear that Akira has no boundaries to what she is willing to do to get her revenge. Even if it means condemning her own brother to unspeakable pain and misery. Akira plans to feed more karma to the tree with as many casualties in the capital as it may need to reach its full revival. All she needs is for Same not to stand in her way. Same dismisses Akira, saying she cannot let her take the lives of innocents in the capital. The tensions between the two rise and they engage in a deathly battle where each is equally strong as the other. Simultaneously, the watchdogs realized the peculiarity in the tree's development. The doll that Can servant buried in the tree hollow served as a gateway for horrors. Now that gateway seems to be opened, releasing the spirit of Duke Can, who had encapsulated himself in the doll, a detail that was not passed down in the legend. Akira is elated to finally witness the horror in all its glory. She marks a trail for the horror to follow, leading all the way through the forest to the royal court into Michinaga's chambers. The seal she placed on his back earlier glows, marking the horror's target. The gigantic horror marches through the woods into the capital, reciting Duke Can's poems. Akira climbs on its shoulder, a crazed grin on her face. Her thirst for revenge has clearly sent her over the edge. Yorinobu in the meantime, manages to attack the Kebi Ishigarding Reiko and Kintoki and freeze Kintoki. As the two grapple with the kabishi to free Reiko, who is still unconscious, they are distracted from combat when countless glowing sakura petals fall to the ground around them, transforming into horrors that terrorize the kabishi. Yorinobu and Kintoki tackle the horrors as best as they can till Kan's horror subdues them with its deadly lightning. Reiko regains consciousness to find Yorinobu and Kintoki collapsed on him. He struggles to free himself as the horrors run rampant into the capital, causing a massacre. As the mammoth horror enters the royal court, it breaks through barred gates, causing panic and fear among the station kabishi. A soldier runs into Michinaga's chambers, informing him of the horror's approach. It seems to be headed for Michinaga. The kabishi expects to see the fear on Michinaga's face, but when he looks up it's a demonized grin instead. Outside the chambers, Saimai arrives to assess the situation again. She was unable to stop the horror from leaving the forest, but now she has Reiko to help her. He has successfully freed himself and reaches her asking to be briefed on why Akira is mounted on the horror. Saimai gives him a very brief summary and armors him. Reiko is back in action. Kintoki and Yorinobu help tackle the horrors running rampant around the capital. Back in the chambers, Michinaga walks out against the better judgment of his guard, crazed by his wish to see the great horror, a living embodiment of Duke Kansas. Michinaga walks out to behold the great horror in all its glory with Akira by its side. Her eyes are full of rage as she urges the horror to end Michinaga once and for all. However, Reiko suddenly springs down, standing in her way. He tries to reason with her, telling her she cannot take the lives of humans. Saimai backs him and his words. Akira does not understand why Reiko wants to protect a monster like Michinaga. That is because Reiko is a true Makai knight, true to his oath and his word. Alas, Akira has already tasted the intoxicating delight of revenge on her way to the court. She cannot stop now. The great horror cries tears of blood as it cries out again, Tokumaru's spirit still intact within. It reminds Akira of what she has sacrificed to reach this moment. She must go on. Saimai realizes that Akira will not heed Reiko's words and must be stopped. At the same time,